Hello, and welcome to the How We Do Digital Ministry podcast. I'm your host, Charlotte Elia. Today's episode is sponsored by Faith Growth. Church websites are notorious for frustrating church staffs, being difficult to navigate, and looking dated. Faith Growth builds simple and beautiful church websites that are easy to update so churches can reach their community. They've helped more than 200, they've helped hundreds of churches revitalize their web presence and can do the same for you. Head on over to faithgrowth.com to book a free consultation today, but not right now, because on this podcast, we talk to leaders who are out in the world engaging folks through digital ministry. And today, I'm delighted to have John Hamer from Community of Christ with us. So, John, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you do digital ministry.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Charlotte. My name is John Hamer, and I serve as the pastor of the downtown Toronto congregation of Community of Christ. So Community of Christ is a progressive Christian tradition church that comes out of the Restoration or Latter-day Saint movement, but has moved a long way from our original founding time. This congregation was first founded in 1836. We've been continuously meeting. The cottage meeting just took place a couple blocks over here, right in the center of the oldest part of the city. And we've been continuously meeting since 1891 until the pandemic, which is when, for the very first time, I think we probably went, had a 2-week, more than a 2-week gap of meeting in person. And so obviously, like so many churches, we had to adapt when in-person meeting was no longer possible, especially considering, as with so many churches, a significant number of our congregants are older, and so therefore even more susceptible even after vaccination and so forth. And so we were, though, in a very we were very well positioned because the congregation had already merged its online worship service with its in-person service. So we had a hybrid ministry already every Sunday going into the pandemic. And then when in-person meetings stopped and we went fully digital, our congregation was better positioned essentially than anyone in our denomination to provide that kind of ministry. And so we kind of quickly became the leading online ministry within our denomination. We had already by the first Easter of the pandemic, over 1,000 people joined us simultaneously online for that service, and has kept up pretty well since then.
Wonderful. So is your body currently meeting in person as well, or no?
Well, no, we're not having any in-person meetings at this point still.
Okay.
And we don't actually right now have plans to.
Okay.
So our ministry has grown so much in the last 2 years, and we're doing so much online programming that it's actually it'll be difficult to do. And there's actually so many more people involved. And like you say, they also are kind of all around the world. And so it isn't the number of people even who are members of the congregation now who live within kind of driving distance is a small proportion of all the people who join us. So in terms of our online ministry in the course of a week, we have our main live stream service that takes place noon on Sunday. We have a congregation member Zoom meeting that follows that for sharing individual needs and so forth. We have a Monday morning mindfulness meditation service. There's meditations then that go all through the weekdays. We have a Tuesday night history, theology, philosophy live stream lecture series. We have a Thursday lectionary discussion group and a social discussion group following that. And then on Saturday, we have a scripture study group. And so it's the number of hours of programming is much increased over what we had prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing. A full load of programming there.
Yes.
I'm interested in decisions you've made or how you've been really intentional about including people not just outside of your immediate geographic area, but globally even.
Yeah. So Canada is multicultural, but it also has in addition to our First Nations heritage, there is the Francophone and Anglophone heritage, and so bilingualism in terms of French and English, and in Community of Christ, we have what we call three kind of core languages. Of course, it's a global denomination, and people speak all kinds of different languages. But the church has made a commitment to have materials in English, Spanish, and French. And so, because there were so few of these services available, we made the decision fairly early on. So within a couple months after the pandemic, to add into. We had some members who were joining us from Montreal and so forth, and so we made the decision to have the entire service continuously pre-translated into the three core languages. And so as a result of that, then we've been able to attract members who speak those languages, right? And so one of the heritage zones of the church is French Polynesia. And so actually consistently after the United States and Canada, the third most people who join us every Sunday for our live stream service are from Tahiti. And because they're able to, read all of the translation, but then of course we have people from there who give sermons and who do other forms of ministry in French. And so then it's translated into English and Spanish and so forth. And same thing where our members in Peru or in El Salvador or in Spain, will speak in Spanish and then it's translated into French and English. And so that's one of the ways we try to anyway make it, very accessible and again, we have ministers who join us every week from around the world. So our tradition is not so much that me as the pastor gives a sermon every single week. Mm-hmm. I give like a little homily to kind of introduce the service, but we invite people from all around. And so we've had, I think in the last year, we've had, 250 different ministers who have spoken in our service.
Wow. How do you identify those speakers and I think how other people reading scripture, other people participating? How do you get those volunteers or those folks?
Well, so we have hundreds of people join us every Sunday, right? And so we do a little bit different than a lot of folks. So a lot of people immediately move to Zoom video conferencing services. We already had a system in place before that became very prevalent. And our system is it's a live stream that is sent out on multiple different channels, but the largest being YouTube and Facebook. And so we have a Zoom meeting behind the scenes. And so all of the ministers who are going to speak in the course of a service are on a Zoom meeting, and that can be brought up onto the screen, and they can read their scripture or say their prayer or whatever they're going to be the thing that they're going to do. And then I'm here in the chapel, and I'm the host, and we go back and forth between that. And we have Leandro here, who's he's in charge of, he's a technical guy, but then he's also our director of music and so forth. And so he's in the chapel with me as we kind of go back and forth between them. And so how we identify people is, a lot of people kind of said, well, Zoom is more interactive than doing a live stream like this, but we kind of find that it isn't, because if you have 100 people on a Zoom service, you can't have them all talk at once anyway. And so generally the only time they're interacting is when they accidentally unmute themselves and they suddenly are talking and this sort of thing. What we have is the chats that are constantly going on in the Facebook and the YouTube channels. And we have volunteer staff who are moderating those chats and who are encouraging talk. And part of the service is, we call it the global welcome, where we're doing engagement questions and so forth. So we identify people in the chats, and also we have had in the course of the last the last year, let's say, we've had 400 donors, and so from all around the world. And so we know that people are committed because they're donating, because they're chatting, they're interacting. When they're doing that, we invite them. We have one of our mission initiatives is develop disciples to serve, and so we invite them first. Okay, please come on and read a scripture, and we see how that works. And we have a technical dress rehearsal so that everybody is looking their best. We line them all up, everybody's feeling comfortable and so on. We have a ministers meeting beforehand so that, again, everybody's comfortable. And we also invite the Spirit to be with us so that we're not just doing this, we're aware that this is not just a technical thing, but it is actually providing ministry. And then we see how it goes. And if the person, is comfortable and that, and so forth, then we invite them back to give an invocation or something like that, or one of the blessings. If that works, then it works out well. We invite people to give what we call the offertory lesson or the peace lesson, and then finally, a sermon, right? And so we generally speaking try to develop people within our own ministry for those roles, but then also within the denomination, there are leaders and other pastors and superstars and so forth that we can invite in, and they'll speak for us and to us. And so, for example, in a month here, we'll have one of the professors from the seminary is going to come and give a sermon and so forth. So that also happens.
Okay, awesome. I watched some of the service from this past Sunday.
Oh, okay.
And a couple things that really struck me. I guess I'll say two kind of bookends on the service. So the sort of extensiveness of your welcome, which I really appreciated and was obvious. It wasn't just welcome folks from my church and globally, and we moved on. But so maybe I want to ask you a little bit about the different folks you touched on there, and then the way it ended with that discussion around it. Again, kind of making these live streams so much more personal in some ways than I think we're accustomed to seeing. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about those two aspects.
Yeah. So we really have. So our denomination is actually not used to doing invitation and growth. We've been in demographic decline for 50 years or so, like that. And so we have congregations that are kind of inward looking, and that's been fine. And that, there's also ways to do ministry that way. But one of the ways that we have been very deliberate is trying to explain to people why we do things, and so you maybe do that every week, and you never think to explain it to somebody who walks in. But part of our writer's guide that we send out to everybody is explain what you mean by this. Don't try not to just use jargon. Try to, sure. And so we actually changed. I said we called it our offertory lesson. We actually changed that, so we call it the lesson of the living church. And so the whole idea of it is to explain something like, we celebrate such and such as the sacrament, and we explain why we do that and our understanding of it, or any number of things. We uphold these 9 enduring principles, and here's one of our enduring principles, and so when we talk about something about the church or its structure, we have we're representative in the sense that we send delegates as a congregation to the National Council, and the National Council sends delegates to the World Conference and so forth, and so just to explain those kind of things so that people are aware of it. Yeah. And part of the reason we do that is because so many people who are with us are brand new. And so our Tuesday night lecture series is actually our most watched. And so, for example, the lecture we had earlier this year on the historical Jesus has had over 100,000 views. Wow. And so as a result of so many people coming in through the lecture series to the Sunday service, there are every week people who say, well, I never thought I'd participate in a church again, but right. You've been very welcoming to me. So we try to be very deliberate in our welcoming in that way. And then, like you say, one of the things we do at the end is the formal service has ended, and we then have a chat with the ministers who have volunteered that week to share some ministry. And that has been that grew out of the pandemic, and so we're all isolated in our, and that kind of thing. And so we kind of said, how are you all doing, and everything like that? How are things how is, frankly, the pandemic going in Tahiti and so forth? And we got to hear all those things. But since then, we are also talking about all of the other issues that everybody is facing as we kind of get to know each other and build community that way.
Awesome.
Did you know your church website can be so much more than a static billboard? With the right changes, you can use your website to connect with people in your community and beyond. Most churches have a complicated and difficult to use website that they avoid. they're missing connections online. Fortunately, we're offering our process in an exclusive guide to help you toward a website that reaches people and gets results. And it's available for free on our website at faithgrowth.com/guide. We've seen our process work in dozens of churches to increase site traffic, spread content farther, and see their community discover them for the first time. Stop tinkering with your website and hoping people will use it. How about you take 5 minutes to look over this process and learn what it takes to make your website actually connect with people? It's all inside our free guide found at faithgrowth.com/guide.
Will you speak a little, tell us more about the music ministry with
Yes.
your live stream? So this wonderful live musicians, Leandro, you mentioned, and then this Beyond the Walls choir.
Right. Yeah. So very early on, and I think lots of churches have found this, when you move from the in-person arena, when you can kind of you control your own space, and maybe congregations are playing pre-recorded music in kind of violation of copyright and so forth, because it's just inside your church and people don't care what churches are doing in that sense. But when you broadcast it onto Facebook and YouTube, then suddenly a lot of people found out, wait a second, we can't just play other people's copyrighted music and so forth, in your service. And so you have to have licenses and so forth. And so one of the things that we immediately found was we didn't have it, we needed music. Music is so essential to, the tradition of Christian worship going back all 2,000 years. In other words, this has been one of the things that is at the heart of our movement. And so fortunately, we had skills available. So my husband, Michael, is a concert pianist, and he produces all of the music, the piano and organ tracks. And then Leandro, who is our financial officer, spiritual formation minister, technology officer, and so forth. But he's also the choir and music director, and he's a gifted singer and also choir director. We have developed fairly rapidly a process of virtual choir. And so it's not as easy or a minor thing, and so it's not easy for another congregation to necessarily be able to duplicate it, without a lot of skills. But Leandro essentially does a thing at the beginning of the week where, so Michael puts down the track for the music. Leandro will then records each of the parts. We do 4-part harmony in our tradition. And then he also directs the choir. He creates a video where he's saying, 1, 2, 3, and stop, and all those kind of things. And so then that chorister emails go out to all of the choir member regulars. And so there's been a couple hundred people over the course of the last 2 years who've sung with the choir, but there's maybe, let's say, 70 or 80 stalwarts, people who will do that. They use their phones to record their voice singing, like they'll have another phone, I think, where they listen to it, and then they record with the one phone, and then they send the track in. And then Leandro blends all of the voices together along with the music to make the final recording. And so it's the results have been pretty amazing. And in fact, actually, our resources are used. Almost every congregation within our denomination makes use now of our music, as we've recorded, I don't know how many hymns, but anyway, 100 hymns or so. And so, and then actually lots of congregations in other churches also use a lot of our hymns too. So, which is fine, because we can tell when somebody's using it on YouTube or Facebook, because we get a copyright notice, but we just let everybody use it. We don't care about that. We're very happy to have people use it. Some people write us to ask permission, and they say, I'm in this Methodist church in some place in Michigan. We're like, oh, that sounds great. So
that's wonderful. That's really generous of you too. Are there any misconceptions around digital ministry that and the future of it, that it's something you think pastors are headed in the wrong direction or are missing out on, maybe?
Well, I do think that So I do think it's difficult to effectively do a hybrid ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that one of the things that can happen, so on the one hand, I think that people tend to think that a digital ministry can't be like a true ministry, that ultimately everybody's got to go back to, in person, and that's the goal and so forth, that this was a temporary thing. It's not, I don't really think that's the case. I do think that we have, it's a little bit of a less, well-traveled road. And so we still have all of these things that, we have a pretty good system for our main live stream service, but all of the other Zoom groups and so forth, those are still, I think, a work in process as we are understanding what full fellowship means.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly also do things like phone ministry and other kinds of ministry to keep people to do one-on-one things. Our church also, for example, has a long tradition of camping together, and we own a lot of campgrounds around the world. And so we are thinking of having like maybe occasional in-person gatherings at a campground, maybe, and that kind of a thing. But the primary way we're trying to have full fellowship is just as a non-in-person, and that's kind of our focus. I think that for folks who aren't going to go that path and who are trying to do, let's say, they want to keep doing they want to do a hybrid service because they want to keep all that they gained by going online, but now they're going to be in person too. They don't want to have all of their shut-ins who were able to see the service because they're unable for health reasons or anything else to move, or they're distant and they have been joining us. They want to be able to now join. And but unfortunately, I think most hybrid services, it's very difficult to remember the people that aren't there with you when you're doing it. Uh-huh. And so people tend to put a camera in the back of the church, and then you forget that the people are even there, and this sort of a thing. So if you're going to do an effective hybrid, you really have to be very aware of all the people there, and the people in the church have to all be aware of them. And there has to be different ways that you're setting that up by having Zoom screens around so that people are reminded that the rest of the people are there with you and so forth, and have components that we have. Like I said, we have our global welcome where Leandro is actually talking to the people that are engaging on the live stream and so forth. That kind of thing has to also happen, I think, to make the hybrid really effective for the people who aren't there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. As we're still all trying to figure this out, mm-hmm. Figure out what we're doing now and what we're going to do, in some ways. What do you cast some vision for us? What do you think the church might look like in 10 years?
Yeah, well, I can say what our kind of vision and our plan is. Sure. So we're hoping to expand essentially the kind of network that we're doing by making strategic alliances with other congregations that maybe can also do an additional programming, right? And so we're going to continue to have our main, which is somewhat traditional live stream service. It's very updated content and theology, but in terms of its form and format, it's very traditional. We are working with other congregations in our denomination to perhaps do a one that is more focused on parents of young children kind of thing, and maybe as a monthly service. And so what we'd like to do is, if you think of like this kind of an existing megachurch model that the evangelicals sometimes have, where they have like a big mega church, but then it has satellites. And so like they've got one service and people come to the satellites and so forth, but then they have their local activities and band and so forth. So what we're kind of thinking is that as we have more members that are in clusters in various places, when in some cases they are close together, they can form their own kind of satellite group. And in some cases, because we're attached to a denomination worldwide, in some cases where there's an older congregation that is, let's say, less able to do everything that's necessary to make a complete Sunday service, they can come to us for the Sunday service, and then they can use their own resources to do more missional stuff locally. And so we're kind of hoping to be that strategic partner with, within our denomination, but actually our materials are very usable in a lot of cases for people in other Christian denominations. Sure. And so we'll continue to make music resources and make them available to people and so forth. And so we're kind of feeling like that's going to be like a partnership where there are some pillar congregations that are content creators, and there are others that are doing fellowship locally together in person, and that can somehow make a hybrid experience that creates kind of full fellowship and allows people to do mission locally.
Wow, so many possibilities, such excitement. Well, John, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Where do you want to be found online?
The easiest place to find us is at our website, which is centerplace.ca, and that's Centerplace spelled the Canadian way with an R-E at the end of center. But you can also find us on YouTube. So Centerplace TV is our YouTube channel. We have now about 30,000 subscribers to that channel, which we think is the largest of any church in Canada, other than the Catholic Church's daily mass. And
Wow.
So we're pretty pleased with how the ministry's been going.
Yeah, I think for listeners, there's so much to learn, not just from the wisdom you shared today, but getting in there and experiencing your resources and seeing how you're doing things. So thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening. We want to invite you who are listening to join our Facebook group, How We Do Digital Ministry. It's a great place to talk with your colleagues and discuss everything digital ministry when you aren't listening to this podcast. The link will be in the show notes. And go ahead and like, subscribe, do all that stuff. You might even get episodes a little bit before they're actually promoted. So good way to keep up with us there. So thank you all. And until next week, peace and blessings.